Smells like farts.
I've not farted once.
Neither have I.
No, I'm just saying it smells like farts. I'm not saying, am I accusing anybody of farting?
Well, we all know
It's kind of like part of the room at this point.
Yeah.
Just saying, it smells a little bit like farts.
Yeah.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I am Sean Anderson, Most Valuable Podcast, and the upcoming segment is from our full Fast Break podcast that we recorded. And if you do want to check out that full podcast, head over to Blog Talk Radio /The Fast Break. You'll be able to find the full podcast over there.
This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. This is a Fast Break Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Anderson. Alongside me, as always, is Ricky Widmer.
What's up, guys?
And Dave Oster.
What's up, everybody?
And today we are going to be talking about the New York Knicks. Carmelo Anthony's basically pretty much a waste of space in the eyes of Phil Jackson. We're talking about Miles Bridges, my boy. Sadly, he's going to be staying, in college basketball. And we're also going to be talking about overrated prospects in the NBA draft. It's going to be a fun podcast. If you're listening on Blog Talk Radio, thank you so much for downloading us and checking us out. If you're watching on YouTube, what up? We're gonna be talking about the Knicks now. Let's get into it. Phil Jackson indicated that the New York Knicks will continue to explore trade options for Carmelo Anthony, saying the All-Star forward would be better off somewhere else. He also said we've not been able to win with Anthony on the court at this time. I think the directions with our team is that he's a player that would be better off somewhere else and using his talent somewhere where he can win or chase that championship. So pretty much, what are your thoughts on this whole thing? Because you look at Carmelo Anthony, where do you think Carmelo Anthony will end up playing next year?
I thought about this driving to the station today, and I was like, I don't know who would want. Like, who would want Carmelo Anthony? Not for the fact of what he brings to a team, but I look at the 24.5 around million that he made base salary this year. The 26.2 that he's owed next year that's his cap hit. I look at it and I go, what team in their right mind would want that unless it's a situation where it's like, hey, let's trade for him so that we have him for a year, and basically it's a marketing ploy where we can just bring him in to bring in some fans for a year and sell some Carmelo jerseys for that 1 year because he does have the early termination after the 2017-18 season. But in my head, I do not see a team in their right mind that would want to go out and trade for Carmelo Anthony, only because it would have to be a short list because Melo would have to say, yeah, I'm okay with that since he has the no trade clause.
Yeah, that's the major concern. With Melo not having, with him having complete control over his future, I think you run yourself into a situation where he wants to be on a contender. He wants to win. All of a sudden, money's not important to him after signing that huge contract. It's like, you know what? I'd rather not suck. That's fun. So you need to find a contender with a lot of money to spend, which, guess what? That's not usually a thing because contenders have a core built up. You're not usually looking for that $30 million piece just to make your team, champions.
Really, the only team we always throw out is the Boston Celtics that really usually need that piece.
Yeah, but the question is they've got a lot of guys who they're, eyeing as of late. And I think the big thing with Melo is, now you have even Phil talking down to you about how you don't try on both ends, about how, you're not a great fit for us. He's selling him his own stock short here. And it's like, I'm not quite sure what Phil's idea of how Carmelo's going to leave town is, but he's not helping it.
No, I don't understand what's going on because, first off, I'm not surprised by any of this. It's weird that it's coming out right now.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's coming out right now after the season's over at this specific time. I think you wait until he's after he's traded. It's kind of like the Vlade Divac stuff. Like, he said that there was a better trade on the table for DeMarcus Cousins, yet he said that after the trade was over. I don't understand what Phil's trying to do. And the biggest thing that's at least coming out that I think is hurting Phil Jackson with this is, yes, Carmelo's probably gonna stay on the team, and that's where I think I think's gonna happen. I don't think you can get rid of Carmelo. I don't think Carmelo wants to leave, and I think he wants to spite Phil Jackson for coming out and and doing this to him. I don't think that Carmelo's going to leave, and I don't think Carmelo should leave. I think Phil Jackson's handling this terribly, and that's shown by Carmelo Anthony. Reports coming out that Kristaps Porzingis has skipped exit meetings with the Knicks management due to frustration over what he perceives as dysfunction. This is dysfunction in the New York Knicks.
Well, that has to do a lot more than just Phil Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, obviously James Dolan, but Phil Jackson is...
Melo's a part of it, too, a little bit.
But I would say Phil Jackson coming out and bashing Carmelo and just seeing the way that the organization's run, that stems from the guy who helps run the organization in Phil Jackson. It obviously comes from James Dolan. We know that the Knicks have not been good in the time that he's been owner, at least from 2000 to now. You only see a couple spurts in there, a couple of years that they made the playoffs, but outside of that, they haven't been a force in the NBA. You look at obviously you look at Dolan, you look at Phil Jackson. I just don't see this Knicks team getting anywhere anytime soon because the guy that you're supposed to be building around is frustrated with your team, and I don't think James Dolan's going to get rid of Phil Jackson. James Dolan's not going to get rid of himself, and I think those are the two biggest problems with the New York Knicks is Phil Jackson and James Dolan. I don't think it's Carmelo Anthony. I don't think it's Kristaps Porzingis. I think it's the people running the organization. And again, I'm not a fan, so New York Knicks fans, I know you guys will tell us what the true problem is, but I think I'm not missing the mark here by saying it's Phil Jackson and James Dolan.
Yeah. And again, when you have so much dysfunction in the ownership, it's hard to get a good team vision going forward and really sell Kristaps on, here's how we're going to build around you, here's how we're going to plan around you. I think it's just a cloud of Melo is still hanging there, and it's like that's number one on the list. Once Melo is moved on from the Knicks, like it's kind of like partying the clouds in the sky. You get some sunshine, you get some fresh air, and I think that one of the things like for Melo, I just think that, we talked about it earlier this year with the Clippers being an option, with them, almost for sure going to lose J.J. Redick, and then the options for a couple other players. I think that they're going to have the money, and they could reload and be like, you know what, maybe we would rather have Melo on this team.
Is this not a similar... The situation I think in my head is the Knicks are going through right now exactly what the Lakers did with Kobe. The big difference is Kobe's was the retirement tour, and it was the last few years you're thinking, well, you know what? Kobe's not what he used to be. This Laker team obviously isn't as good as they were. And then it was that last year. This is that same thing to me, except different in the fact that it's not a farewell tour. It's the Knicks can't start a rebuild, can't start to get better until Melo is gone and moved on.
I think kind of with what you're saying there is that the rebuild won't get started unless Carmelo's off.
Yeah, exactly like the Lakers. Lakers couldn't start their rebuild unless Kobe was gone.
I think in that sense, yes, but it's completely different in every other way because they signed Kobe, but also didn't want to get rid of Kobe. Yeah. They kept Kobe because Kobe was a legend
I'm saying
in LA.
They're polar opposites, but in that main core central, they're the same.
I just think that this whole thing's a fucking mess because you signed Carmelo to that contract, and Carmelo signed it and wanted to stay in New York because of the money. The only thing, the biggest problem is Phil Jackson didn't have the hindsight to see the time that Melo did spend in New York. Obviously, he had that great 26 games or whatever when he came over from the Nuggets. But outside of that, Carmelo hasn't been fantastic. Carmelo hasn't been in top 5 in the MVP races in New York. He hasn't been lighting it up like he used to in Denver. You look at that team and they just have done nothing pretty much with Carmelo at least making a splash in the playoffs. I just don't see any cohesiveness on that team at all. I mean, just Carmelo is a blob out there, and I'm not saying that like from a play stand, but just like if you put him on a different team, I think Carmelo could be a very useful player.
Well, yeah,
I mean
he's still an elite scorer when he wants to be. He can still get you some boards. He can pass. It's something he has grown his game a little bit.
He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be there. Phil Jackson doesn't want him there. James Dolan, I don't know what he just doesn't want Charles Oakley there. I don't know what's going on with Hornacek. I can't grade his performance because then again, I don't think he has the right team around him. It's kind of like with Fred Hoiberg where he doesn't have the true guys for his system around there. Kristaps doesn't really, obviously with this coming out, this is the most concerning thing that Kristaps doesn't want to be there and is frustrated with the ownership because that's the guy that you're supposed to be building around. It just goes back to the constant thing that we talk about, that the Knicks are just a complete fucking mess because of James Dolan and because of Phil Jackson. They didn't have the hindsight to realize that Carmelo Anthony was not the star that he was when they re-signed him, and especially not to that contract he was. Obviously,
long term and no trade clause.
I mean, you're going to pay Carmelo max money. It's just going to happen, but it's the no trade clause. I think that's the real killer here because I don't understand why you're bashing a guy with a no trade clause before he's not off your team. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand where they're going to go with a rebuild either, because if Kristaps doesn't want to be there, then that pretty much throws a complete wrench in their rebuild.
And the one thing, this is going back a little bit, when Sean, you were saying like, oh, I don't know why Phil is coming out and saying this about Melo when he's trying to trade him. The only thing in my mind I can think is that Phil was sitting there and going, okay, we can try to trade him, but realistically, who's going to want that money, and B, who's he going to want to play for? Those two aspects are not going to line up, because the teams that he's going to want to play for are, like Dave said, the playoff teams that don't want to take on a ton of money. So with me, I'm starting to think Phil Jackson, with all this bashing of Carmelo, is kind of a saving face move, to where it's like, when what probably happens is we get through the end of the 27-2018 year, they exercise the early termination by Melo. We're splitting ways because it's not going to work here. When that ends, in the face of the fans, Phil doesn't want them to go, well, who should we hate, Melo or our management? If he does this now, kind of lays the groundwork now, when it happens, the fans will hate Melo, and Melo will be thrown under the bus, and the pitchforks and everything and the torches will be going for Melo, not for him.
I don't think that's true at all. I think Knicks fans understand what's happening. What's happening. I think they see that Phil Jackson's just tanking this. I think they are frustrated with Phil Jackson, the fact that he hasn't been able to bring a playoff team in his tenure at his position with the New York Knicks. I think they're frustrated with James Dolan because of the lack of success they've had under them. I don't think this is going to fall on Carmelo Anthony, because Carmelo Anthony's just being treated like shit right now. You brought him in, you signed him, you gave him the no trade deadline, trade clause, and now you're bashing him before trading him. When you're making a trade in fantasy football, when you want a guy, you're not going to bash the guy that you're giving up. You're not going to be like, well, I don't think he's going to be doing anything.
Well, and that's why
you're not going to sell him short. You're going to try to sell him as high as possible, so you get the guy that you want.
And that's what I'm saying. Realistically, in his head, he's sitting there thinking, before they even started trading him, realistically, we're not going to be able to trade him. So I need to do this to kind of save face.
How is he saving face, though? Because it just looks bad PR-wise, and it's hurting Kristaps Porzingis.
Everyone picks a side in the end. When something breaks up, you either go after side A or side B as the side you hate, and he wants fans to go after Carmelo and be like, yeah, that Melo, he was a bum. We didn't need him.
But I still think that that's going to stay true. And sorry to cut you off. I still think that fans will see Carmelo as a little bit of a bum, but I still think they're going to blame Phil Jackson for the majority of that. I would still say majority of fans would blame Phil Jackson and blames James Dolan. And especially if this leads to Kristaps going off the team because of the dysfunction, Carmelo's not creating this dysfunction. Phil Jackson, who's supposed to be the leader, who's supposed to be putting this team together, James Dolan, who's the owner of this team, is supposed to be building this in the image of New York, in the image of what he thinks a team should be. Those are the people that are to blame, who run the franchise. Carmelo doesn't run the franchise. This isn't like Coach LeBron. Carmelo isn't running the New York Knicks. Kristaps is getting upset with management and not this. So if you have majority of fans going against Phil Jackson and they lose Kristaps, that's not saving face. That's just hurting your chances.
They're not going to lose Kristaps, because he's basically going to be a Knick through the 2018-19 season, and then he's a restricted free agent. How many times do we realistically see restricted free agents?
But again, you're saying we're going to cut a talented player and just get no value back for him, and that's okay. And
frees up cap space.
Yeah. And so if you have a disgruntled player on your team, and if you're trying to build around a player who your core is Kristaps right now, and you're like, that's okay if he can be angry at us, he's still under contract. No, that's not. You don't want to build around somebody who absolutely doesn't want to be there. That's like Paul George, when they know he doesn't want to be there. So why would they go out and incite hate out of him for the organization if they're like, no, you're still the future, don't worry about it, and even if you don't want to play, you're too bad.
And I don't think there's a question that he's not the future.
And all you're going to get is another Carmelo.
It's just, if he is the future, you don't want to make him unhappy with the organization. You want to make sure that there's a road for him to see, that there's a path that we're going to put you on, and we're going to get you a team around you, and we're going to make you great, and we're going to get to the playoffs, and we're going to do this together. Not like, hey, we'll deal with you later. We got to deal with this Melo thing. I know you're angry, but too bad. Deal with it. Just play for us.
And the
for a
other
couple
thing
more
right
years.
now, you have dysfunction. You have a player like that right now with Carmelo Anthony who doesn't want to play for the Knicks, who doesn't want to be in that team, and now you're just having a Carmelo Anthony who isn't playing to his fullest ability. Why is if you're Kristaps,
honestly,
if you're in this situation where you're locked in, why were you going to be like, yeah, I'm going to give it all to this team right here because they're treating me like shit and I don't feel like this team's going anywhere. Why would you want to play for that team? It's like going to a shitty job for whatever how many years he can be locked up for.
So, but the thing with that's that first I'll start with the Kristaps Porzingis thing. I'm not saying it's not okay for him to be upset, and I'm not saying the Knicks shouldn't try to talk to him now to kind of douse the flames, but the Knicks don't have to worry about him going anywhere because he's going to be a Knick until after the 2019 season. You can sit there, you can give him a plan, you can make sure
but
that,
if he's not
it's
happy, he's not going to play well.
Dave, that's what I'm saying. You can do all the things and say, here's the plan, here's the thing, but in all realistic odds, he's a Knick until 2019. So on the business side, you don't have to worry about him leaving. To me, the biggest problem with this team, there are two players that need to get off the books so that the Knicks can basically gut this and maybe look to free agency and a little bit of the draft. They do have a draft pick this year in the lottery. Is Melo? They need to get rid of him. And the thing with the
how
thing
are they
that
going to get rid of him though?
The thing that you said with Melo doesn't want to play for this team, but if Melo really wanted to be off the Knicks, the no trade clause would have been waived. That's just what I think. Is if he really wanted to be off the Knicks, he would waive the no trade clause and let him kind of trade him wherever he wants. He's number one that needs to move, whether that's via trade, whether that's via the early termination. He needs to go. Also, Joakim Noah. He is under contract until the 2021 season.
How are you
going to
get
become a free agent?
How are you getting him off the books?
You got to trade him.
Who the fuck wants Joakim Noah?
Exactly.
You're going to have
that's
to
the
get
situation
first to have
they're
them
in.
take Joakim Noah. You would.
That's the situation the Knicks are in. To me, Joakim Noah is a bigger what the fuck are we going to do than Carmelo.
Like, you're going to give the Sixers a first-round pick just to eat his contract.
I don't even think the Sixers would want that.
At this point, probably not.
I don't think that. I
How
agree.
smart do the Bulls look for getting rid of Rose and Noah for what they got? Looking back,
what did they get for Noah? They didn't get anything
Jose
for Noah.
Calderon is the only thing I remember, and that was the Rose trade.
No,
they let
Noah's
the
a free
thing I
agent.
remember.
Yeah, they let
Noah's a
Noah
free
walk.
agent.
They let Noah walk. So
I mean, it was just
they got Jeremy
awful
Grant.
contracts all around. But
They got Jeremy Grant and Robin Lopez.
yeah, I mean, the thing I keep coming back to is I feel like Carmelo doesn't necessarily want to leave town, but he's kind of putting money in his own stock here, saying, yeah, no, I'm going to play here because that's my thing. So if you want to get rid of this management asshole who doesn't know what he's doing, maybe we could, get back on track here, because he seems to be thinking that it's about 50-50 chance that he's going to stay or he's going to go, or Phil's going to stay or Phil's going to go. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Melo doesn't necessarily want out, but he wants change one way or the other. And it's at this point, it's not unreasonable to think that Phil could get removed from his position. Yeah. It's not unthinkable that James Dolan could get removed. So it's
James Dolan's the owner.
I know, but we've seen owners get taken out before.
I mean, it's
that's for saying racist stuff.
Yeah,
I know.
I was thinking that's a Donald Sterling situation.
Fan hatred causes things, and that's all I'm saying. It's like I feel like Carmelo isn't like peace, I'm done. It's more of a hey, I really want Phil gone, and I really want this organization to get back to where they should be. Otherwise, I'm done.
I mean, honestly, Melo's been consistent. Melo had a better year than he did last year. I mean, It's not like Melo's a bad player. And Melo's in the kind of the position of power right here because, like you said, he doesn't need to go. Mm-hmm. He's got the. I don't. Again, the early termination. I'm not sure if the Knicks can terminate that contract or if Melo terminates that contract. But again, he's still locked up for 2 more years for sure.
It's this next year for sure, and then after this next year,
he's still there for another year if he doesn't waive that no trade clause. So pretty much Phil Jackson's going to have to deal with him for another year because I get Carmelo can if he wants to actually win he can go somewhere else. But then again, he's only 32 years old. He can wait. He'll still be as good as he is in when he's 34 years old. He can still make a ton of money there. And I still think New York Knicks fans generally like Carmelo Anthony. I don't think they dislike Carmelo Anthony.
And the one thing I'm going to cut you off really quick because the Knicks are fucked. You want to know why? I just looked up on NBA.com. Early termination option. An early termination option gives the player the right to end the contract.
Yeah, so it's
the
them
Knicks are
having
screwed.
they can eat the contract and release him. That's the Knicks' only option if he won't waive the no trade.
Well, no, Melo is the one that says
no. They can release him. They can pay off his contract and release him outright.
And that's a ton of money.
That is
it's $27.9 million for that last year. Then,
well, if they do it this year,
he doesn't,
that's 40, 50 something. So it's not gonna
That's
happen.
the thing.
It's just not gonna happen.
And that's why I feel like Phil might lose out on this battle, or they're gonna have to wait it out for one more year and hope that something changes.
You can't release him. You can't trade him. You can't do anything with him. So it's really you either stick it out with him and Phil, or you get rid of one of them, and then that would probably clear up the Kristaps message because Kristaps, like you said, he even said in the thing, it's just I don't know. There's no communication, and there's no communication between Hornacek. There's no communication between Phil. Phil's trying to make him run a certain offense, but Phil also is bashing his team. I don't understand Phil's position. I don't. I really don't. Is he a GM? Is he
Part-time coach?
He's supposed to be the president. So like Theo.
Yeah. But he's not. When have you ever heard Theo being like, "Hey, Joe Madden, I think you should bat the pitcher 8th, then have a guy batting, a catcher batting 9th." He doesn't do that because he lets the manager go.
Yeah, that's
he lets the coach
That's
coach.
the problem. And the thing between that is Theo was never a manager before becoming a president of baseball
Phil
operations.
Jackson's one of the best coaches of all time.
Phil Jackson, it's one of those things where, hey, I've got this many rings. I think I know what I'm talking about.
Phil needs to learn his position. Pat Riley did it. Pat Riley learned his position. He knew when to step in. He knew when to
transition.
Yeah,
and Pat Riley has been successful in the front office.
He's known when to step in, and he's known when to just leave it.
Right.
The Heat sucked, but he knew what Spoelstra can do. And look what the second best record after the All-Star break. Pat Riley has done the successful. I think that Phil Jackson should learn from Pat Riley.
And the one thing I've kind of been thinking is through this whole conversation, I'm looking at the standings right now for this year, and I'm thinking, who would want to trade for Melo? And I'm looking at playoff teams because honestly, that's where Melo would want to go. Who are teams that could use Melo to maybe get over a hump? And I came up with 3. They're all in the Western Conference. I don't think he's going to get traded here. I just want to throw out teams so that our fans have some kind of concrete evidence. The Houston Rockets, the LA Clippers, the OKC Thunder. The Clippers I didn't work anything out with. The Rockets I tried. They don't have the money to work anything out. I don't think they want I have a Thunder trade. Are you guys ready to hear a crazy Thunder trade?
Mm-hmm. Bring it, tinfoil.
The Thunder would be receiving Carmelo Anthony and Lance Thomas. The Knicks would be receiving Cantor, Oladipo, and Dougie McBuckets.
That's awful.
That's what you would need to because the one thing that's also, the Knicks can't just trade Carmelo straight up because they'd be over the luxury tax. So that's why I had to throw Lance Thomas onto this deal.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that trade at all.
It works.
It doesn't make you feel good.
I'm saying it works. I'm not saying it would happen. I'm just saying it works.
It's that small Venn diagram, where the 2 circles overlap. There's only a few teams in there.
I think Oladipo. I think Anthony's an upgrade over Oladipo. But then again, do you want to get rid of the speed that Oladipo has?
Well, in my mindset,
Carmelo doesn't have speed.
Melo would basically be your Batman and Robin with
nice.
Russ and Melo.
Yeah,
and
I understand that.
Cantor, you've got Steven Adams, Cantor kind of was injured this year anyways.
He's still an offensive
I know.
He punched a chair.
Oladipo's one of those, 6.5 for 5 years. Do you want to give that up? And then Dougie is, to me, you can trade him without batting an eye.
Yeah, no, Dougie is valueless.
I don't know. I think he stays in the Knicks. I don't think he's going to trade it. I think that Phil Jackson isn't going to be able to get rid of him. And
do you feel like they're going to swing again at free agency for the fences?
Yeah, no miss. They'll miss.
I know, that's just...
It doesn't... Yeah. They'll miss at every single player.
So we're keeping Melo, and we're going to try again for a playoff push.
Players already in the organization are frustrated. Why the hell... They see what's happening with Carmelo. Why would any free agent be like, yeah, that makes sense? The only players that will go are like a Joakim Noah, a Timofey Mozgov, guys who have been injured, need a second chance, and you're like, oh, you're going to pay me $72 million over 4 years? That sounds fantastic. Yeah, I'll do that, especially Joakim Noah. He's probably like, yeah, I got so much security right now. There's not going to be able to bring in any huge free agents. And Colin Cowherd was talking about the Dallas Mavericks not being able to bring any free agents in. But then again, it's like big names. Yeah. Name the last fucking superstar that the Knicks brought in through free agency that wasn't a complete bust. Stephon Marbury, bust. Allen Houston, bust.
Bargnani?
Bust.
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to think names.
Stoudemire.
Bust.
Yeah. Complete bust.
Yeah.
They bust. They always swing and miss.
Any names coming to the Knicks?
Eddie Curry.
The only one I think of is I remember him mostly for his on the Knicks and then afterwards Latrell Sprewell.
Yeah. So they swing and miss all the time.
Yeah, I think Melo's stuck on the Knicks, and I think that it's a you budge first kind of a situation, and they're not good enough to tank all the way down. So they're going to keep getting, interesting non-lottery pick. Lottery, but that like fringe.
I mean, they only got 7th this year, so we'll see what happens. Any final thoughts on the Knicks?
I mean, it's a complete dumpster fire. And I'm sorry, Knicks fans, but I'm glad I'm not a Knicks fan. At least my dumpster fire is just fire garbage.
No, I mean, if they weren't in New York, they could do something really like super tanky, and I'd love it because that's the way I go. But they're in New York. They're going to keep Melo. He's going to draw names and people and money, and that's all it's all about.
I can't wait to talk about this in 3 more months. I can't wait because it's going to be
NBA draft time. Is he going to get traded at the draft?
Some crap's going to come up where the Knicks talk about this. Phil Jackson's
Could
in
be
the
a
news
month.
running
Could
his
be
mouth.
2.
It's going to be something, but we're going to be talking about the Knicks when it comes up. Thank you. Oh, shit. Oh, it's just one of our videos scared me a little bit. Don't forget to check out that one. And also don't forget to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. But thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.